I took a quick look. Do we yet have quorum?
We do.
We do have quorum. Okay.
Barely.
And are we streaming live?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Barry. And are we recording?
Yes.
We are now. Perfect. Well then, I'll call to order special meeting number 335 of the Wachusett Regional School District Committee. Today is Thursday, May 6th, and we are streaming live and recording. The first order of business is public hearing. Barry, do we have anybody signed up for public hearing tonight?
No.
Okay. Moving along, next item is fiscal year 2020 budget. I'll entertain a motion to approve the fiscal year 2020 general fund appropriation of $104,553,279 and assessments to member towns of Holden $32,969,402, Paxton $7,156,440, Princeton $5,200,865, Rutland $13,645,388, Sterling $12,102,930, for total assessment to member towns of $71,075,025.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, and we'll turn the floor to Daryl.
Thank you very much, Mike. And thank you, everyone, for coming back this evening. I know we had a long night last night, and I appreciate you taking time this evening to come back and kind of go through this very important process. So what we'd like to do this evening is I'll share my screen with you of a brief presentation that I will go through. Director Didi will also jump in at times, and we will do this as soon as I can get this up here. Okay, so this is an FY22 budget update. So we did want to talk to you about a couple of things that have, we've been talking about now in the office for a little over a week, and we wanted to bring this to the full committee in order to talk about how we might be able to lower some of the assessments for the town. So what we're doing is we're recommending a change to the FY22 budget and ultimately the assessments. One thing that I'm stressing this evening is that these changes do not affect any instructional programming, but what they do, in fact, is that they'll actually reduce the tax burden on our communities. So if this is supported by the school committee this evening, amendments that reflect the new budget and assessment amounts will need to be made on the floor at town meetings, which begin this Saturday for the town of Rutland. So why are we here this evening? So first and foremost, it's around budget adjustments. So ESSER 2 funds cannot be used to reduce MLC for member towns. If you recall, that was something that we had put into our original budget. So we've been told that can no longer occur, and that happened through the most recent House budget. ESSER 3 funds will be used to offset COVID-19 costs in FY22. That's an important item to remember. Although we don't have ESSER 3 yet, we're projected to receive a little over $1.3 million. PPE costs will be reduced through ESSER 3 grant and MEMA donations. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Transportation reimbursement has increased, and also an increase in local revenues, E&D, to further reduce town assessments, and it's another item that we're proposing. So again, we'll start with updated information. So first, it's PPE. A few weeks ago, I was notified by the state that MEMA, the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, was actually offering up free PPE to school districts who put in a request. So I immediately had a request put in, and this week we were notified that we're going to be receiving 75 pallets of free PPE. And it's actually going to start being delivered this week, and it was. That's very important for us because it helps us, look at how we might be able to reduce some of our costs for FY22. ESSER 3 funds are also going to be used to purchase PPE for FY22, so we're really talking about two different sources. The estimated value of these resources, it exceeds $200,000, which is currently the amount that's budgeted for FY22. So what we're recommending now is that there's a reduction of $200,000 from the operations and maintenance appropriation for FY22. In terms of salaries, the ESSER 3 grant is going to be used to offset salary costs for permanent substitutes and lunch monitors in each of our schools for FY22. If you recall, this year we actually put in permanent substitutes and lunch monitors in all of our schools in order to provide enough support for the classrooms, especially as we had difficulty, as all communities did throughout the nation, really attaining proper substitutes for schools. So it's something that we're pushing forward into next year. This represents $300,000 currently in the FY22 budget that we can it can be defrayed by use of ESSER 3. And what we're going to do is recommend a reduction of $300,000 from salaries and stipends for the FY22 budget. And why are we proposing these modifications to the budget? Well, ultimately, we've received letters and communications from several towns, really expressing their concern about the increases that were made to the school budget on March 15th. Ultimately, I've had conversations with select board members, FinCon members, and town managers just about their concern and how we might be able to help them out. Also, new details on grants and resources have become available. So the PPE resources, those just came out. The ESSER 3 grant funds, those are just starting to be made available in terms of information that will be coming out from the federal government to the state government. So ultimately, combined with these offsets, a total reduction of $500,000 is what we would be looking for from this past approved budget. So brief update on revenues, so reference to state revenues, regional transportation reimbursement was recently increased in the past, the last House Ways and Means budget by $188,000. And charter school reimbursement was reduced by about $40,000. So really the net increase in terms of our state revenues was a little under $150,000. In terms of local revenues, what we're going to do is propose using another $200,000 out of excess and deficiency for a total of $950,000. This will mean the projected FY21 year-end balance would be sufficient to replenish E&D in order to remain within the policy guidelines of policy 4660, which is basically, it's a 1% total amount. So the net increase to total local revenues would be $200,000. So overall impact on assessments. So town assessments will be adjusted to reflect a $500,000 budget reduction, as noted above, almost $189,000 increase in regional transportation state aid, a little over $40,000 reduction in charter school reimbursement, and a $200,000 increase with the extra use of excess and deficiency funds. So the total reduction in town assessments is almost $850,000. And again, as I mentioned earlier, amendments reflecting the new budget and assessment amounts would need to be made on the floor at town meetings. So this is an example of where the dollar amounts would be if this budget is approved this evening in terms of the assessments for the towns. So Holden's overall budget would be increase from FY20 21 to 22. The increase would be a little over $1.3 million. Paxton would be $312,000. Princeton would be a little over $16,000. Rutland would be almost $450,000 at $446,960. And Sterling would be $13,436. So the total increase to the town, you can see that there is the change from the 315 budget of $848,615. And the overall percentage change for the towns is a little over 3%. And again, in March, there was an improved budget of $105,053,279, or a 2.88% increase. With the modifications that we're proposing this evening, the overall budget would be $104,553,279, or an overall increase of 2.39%. And that is it. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak with you this evening, and we are here to take questions.
Bob Ember, you have a point of information?
Well, I was just wondering where we are in terms of folks who are online and how many people we need here in terms of our 2/3 of the committee to be able to vote on the budget, which is not 2/3.
Sure. So our number to pass the budget or to approve a new budget doesn't change depending on who's here. It's 15 is my count, which is 2/3 of the full school committee. And by my count, we have 18 members here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Ken.
Thanks. So Business and Finance met and for about 2.5 hours last Monday and went over these details. I think the superintendent explained them fairly succinctly, much less than the 2.5 hours 2 weeks ago. The Business and Finance voted 2-2 with respect to this recommendation to the full committee. I'm not going to speak on behalf of the people who voted against it. I won't put words in their mouth. I'll just say what I feel now, just as an individual member, with respect to my own position. I would say there's two different things I want to look at. First off, if I voted for it last time, there's nothing cut from this budget in terms of what we're doing for the kids. So it's helpful for the taxpayers. If I vote against it, the original budget's still there, right? At least this is better, would be my recommendation. If we move forward to the town meeting with the budget we've already submitted, one of two things will happen. They will pass it, which means they pass a budget where we're asking too much from the taxpayers, or they'll fail it and we'll come back to this board probably in a 1/12. And to be honest, with the history this committee has, we'll probably come up with something like what we're talking about tonight. If we change it tonight, it might still fail. If it still fails, whatever, we come back. But if it fails, at least we know where the towns are and we know what our new starting point should be for our cuts. So I think it'd be a more informative fail than if we vote against this tonight. Arguments definitely that we should have done something like this the first time, I would definitely hear them. If I could have made a motion to amend, the chair asked us not to, I would have. I do think this is more what maybe I would have liked to have seen the first time. That's in the past. This is the now. I think we're being responsive to the towns, responsive to the taxpayers. We're not cutting ahead of the towns. I know I've heard that in the past. Why cut before the towns say anything? Well, they have, right? And we're not hurting any of our operations by doing this. So I encourage people to vote for it. As myself, Business and Finance was 2-2. We did go through the details in pretty gory detail, and I think the superintendent reflected them pretty well. But I'd be happy to also answer questions about specifics without having an opinion furthermore.
Thanks, Ken. Mike Pantos next.
I'd like to know from the administration when this new proposed change was supplied to the town select boards, what time frame they've seen it, if at all yet. Yeah,
so again, this is something that's it's a proposed change. It is public information now, so it's out there. And you know, how this information is then conveyed ultimately is going to ultimately be dependent upon Mike, whether or not it gets passed this evening. So,
Daryl, through the chair, I've had a conversation with the town administrator in Rutland. I've had several conversations with the chair of finance in Holden in just the past couple of days.
All right, thank you both. And is it expected that the school committee member from the said town will stand up at town meeting and make the amendment, or what's the process for that?
So Mike, it's usually what we do is it's the last member that's voted in. So I think that's you, right? No, that's a great question. Sherry, actually, what we do is we we put something out to all school committee members, and this is just another kind of plug at this. We put something out for all school committee members to basically be the voice of the school committee at the town meeting. So in Rutland, Sherry has offered to do that, and she actually met with Bob and Dan today to talk a little bit about that. So that is where it would happen. Yes, you're correct.
Thank you.
Carl.
All right. So I don't know if anyone had the pleasure of watching the 2.5-hour meeting that Ken had alluded to, but I was one of the 2 votes to not recommend this going forward. And admittingly, part of it was that at the time I just hadn't poured it over and I hadn't thought it over, and so I wasn't ready to make a recommendation forward. Although I had to second the motions to put it on the floor even, and then proceed to vote again. But regardless, so I was one of the ones, and admittingly, even right now, I'm still a little bit on the fence. I voted no last time. I'm more inclined to vote for this one. Makes things more favorable for the towns in the short term, and it's more accurately reflecting one-time expenses being used with grants, which is what we'd want to do with grants anyway. That being said, I mean, there are still kind of structural ways that we run our district and spend money in our district. I think that we really do need to take a harder look at in terms of what things we can do to minimize cost escalation year after year after year. But I don't think this is the budget to draw that line in the sand. I think this, as I said, I'm inclined to vote yes, and it's gets us to next year, and we can kind of work through that more. But that was a little bit, at least my backstory from the business and finance meeting. So just some context.
Thanks, Carl. Malaya next.
Can I let Bob go before me, because I just lost my note to myself? Can I defer until after Bob? Thank you.
Yep.
So Malia's going to regret this because I have a bunch of issues here. The first is, if our PPE costs ultimately are less than the $200,000, how does that affect the federal or state monies? I don't know where it's coming from that we receive, because we're banking on the 200,000.
Yeah, it doesn't. If they're less than that, then what we can do is utilize those funds for other items.
Okay. And Daryl, if I may, one other piece of this is that I did explain to Business and Finance is that we're also closer to receiving our MEMA reimbursement. We'll be looking at approximately $112,000, and we don't have that money yet, but we'd be looking to create a special revenue fund as a depository for that cash.
Okay, thank you. And then secondly, I was wondering if business and finance, I mean, one of the questions I had that you've answered is where was business and finance and their split on it. So, but I was wondering how you feel about that ED use increase as a committee. Maybe the chair wants to respond to that.
The E&D, you mean?
Yeah, because you're increasing another, I think it's $200,000 of E&D that we're going to be depleting ourselves of. And I was wondering where business and finance was in terms of that additional decrease of E&D.
And business and finance didn't separate out its votes on different parts of it. We only voted on the overall package that was presented, and that was a 2-2 vote. So I can only speak for myself. I think that administration has assured us that they're going to get back to the level in the policy with expected revenues from transportation and such. It's always a risk, right?
Okay. And then the last thing, and again, I'm not opposed to voting on this, but, I think, the big picture is we have significant issues as a district. Again, I think we need a much more robust central office. We have a dramatic number of classrooms that are over our ratios in terms of too many kids. I think we don't have enough honors and AP classes. I think we really ought to have that program at the high school in terms of bringing kids back and recouping those state funds for I don't know the exact name of it, but it's basically broadening the views of the type of education that we provide in the high school. So I mean, we have all these significant needs, and I guess the bottom line question is, if we vote for this, are we in fact giving up funds that would be useful to pursue these desperately needed goals? And I deeply worry about that. So I guess I'd like administrative response here, and maybe business and finance.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that, Bob. So you were talking about Chapter 74 for the high school. So again, these are one-time funds. And one of the things we're attempting to do is really hit these areas up that we're hoping PPE, we're not going to have to deal with again in a couple of years. We're hopeful that we're not going to have lunch monitors and pay for full-time substitute teachers in all of our buildings because we're paying more than we would a typical substitute to have them constant throughout the year. So the goal would be to hit these one-time fund or these one-time costs up with these grant funds, knowing that if we were to put these toward staffing or other items that we would then have to raise funds to support them even more the following year, that's a concern. So as we kind of go through grant usage and how we kind of play that out, we always have to be really careful that we don't put ourselves in a structural deficit, because those are and again, I do know superintendents who have done this in the past, and this happened with a lot of school districts back when in I think 08, 09, Dan, with the ERA funds, where superintendents, school districts used those funds, those one-time monies, to put in more teachers, more support. They bought whatever it was, technology, but then they couldn't replenish, they couldn't rehire once those funds dried up.
That's correct, Darryl. It was actually 2008 through 2010.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
But my understanding, and maybe it's incorrect, is if we instituted that program at the high school, that's a 1 or 2 year hit, and then we start to receive state monies that offset that. Is that incorrect?
No, and yes, well, yes and no. So the goal would be that you're going to get more money from the state. The costs associated with it, the upfront costs and the ongoing cost at first, they're greater. And you in terms of a break even, it's really dependent upon how much space you have, how many kids can get into the program. It's a little more complicated. We did meet with DESE about this not this past summer, but the summer before. We walked through the building, we took a look at spaces and so forth, and they did let us know that the upfront costs associated with this moving forward. The break-even point is down the road, but you're not sure where down the road. And that's what I'd be concerned with. I'd hate to start a program, not be able to afford it, and then have to, pull it back, especially a place up at the high school where we're trying to do as many different things as possible to support as many different types of learners. So I totally hear what you're saying, Bob. I do appreciate that, but I don't think these are the funds that we should be tapping into for that.
Okay, thank you. I'll listen to others.
Thank you, Malaya. Are you ready?
Yeah, and it's not major. I just couldn't find them. So, first, I again will not speak for the Business and Finance Subcommittee, but I am a member of it. So, we did spend a long time discussing this in great detail. One of the question of E&D I know did come up and was discussed quite a bit. And my personal thought on that was that I think I may have even asked a question about it. We were assured that would be reimbursed essentially by the budgetary changes and replenished by the point it was calculated this year. So that was certainly discussed. I ideally don't like using more out of E&D. However, with that reassurance, I felt that was a reasonable trade-off for what we're trying to do. I think that, and I personally was somewhat conflicted by this whole situation, because it does not get to where the town said at the roundtable where they wanted to be. At least two of the towns. I don't know where the other towns are, but at least the two that have been most vocal, it does not get to quite where they want to be. And one of those is the one I represent. So I obviously paid a lot of attention to that. However, it is heading in the right direction. And again, I focused more on the numbers for the town I'm in, because they're one of the ones that's most vocal. It does not get to where they want. However, between March and this proposal, it's for Holden at least, it's a almost $360,000 difference. I know they were talking about an override, and their consideration was if it's $80,000 over what we need for an override. This cuts $360,000 off of their assessment. So to me, that's although it's not the ideal, given our overall budget situation and a lot of the increases in the assessments, unfortunately, are still coming from the state side. When you look at the MLC, Holden's went up by, almost $400,000, I believe, this year. That's something totally beyond our control. Transportation, again, there's state formulas involved. I think it's a much more complicated picture than, then it's not all in our control, I guess is my point, to make it simplified. And I've dug into the numbers quite a bit on the state level, which I won't bore you all with, but there's a lot of things impacting this in terms of how the state is counting enrollment. Being held harmless is actually making us spend more money than we would otherwise. It's a weird glitch in the budget system, but it's true. So in student population and how that's divided, it's unfortunate that our towns are uneven in that, but using the formulas that we have to work with, I think this is a step in the right direction, and I would support that, because we've reduced a lot out of this budget. I don't think we're spending excessively. I don't think we're cutting programs thanks to having the grants to cover things like PPE and the extra substitutes and monitors. I think thankful we have those funds to use for those purposes, and I think it's an appropriate use of them. And I think even though it's not quite where some of the towns would like us to be, I think it is a huge step in the right direction. And I think if we, I would rather, it's way better than where we were in March, in my opinion. So I think any step in the right direction is better than where, is closer to where they want us to be. And I think it's to our benefit to bring this to them and allow them to vote on that.
Thank you, Matt.
So I want to call something out. I've been pinged by somebody who's waiting to get into the meeting, a representative from one of the towns, and I don't know who controls the keys to that, but I just wanted to point that out. They're waiting to get into this meeting. I did have a question and a follow-up through the chair, if I can. Member Mills, I think you had mentioned something about business finance, about perhaps making an amendment to the motion. And could you just talk to what the nature of that proposed amendment would have been?
I'm sorry, that was just me personally. That wasn't business and finance. What I was saying was, at our original conversation in March, the chair asked us not to make amendments during our conversation when it passed. I personally would have been inclined to do so. It wound up passing. That was just totally me, nothing to do with business and finance. I'm just representing myself.
Cool. I just wanted to, I didn't follow the dots there, and I wanted to make sure. I did just have a question more on the items that this impacts. So Dr. McCall, there's an item on full-time substitutes. Can you just talk to what that means in terms of number of bodies, where they are, et cetera, and if that staff is already in place, if it's something that this is just allocating funds to offset that, or if that's something that's new to this budget tonight?
Yep. So great question, Matt. So we're basically talking about 14 bodies that we pay approximately $150 a day to, in order to be a full-time person in the building, available every single day. So we did budget that into FY22, and what we're planning on doing is offsetting the ESSER 3 funds, so using those funds to offset that dollar amount. I do not plan on using those bodies again in FY23. This is again a one-time, I think, issue that we're going to be dealing with. As
the Meadowlands kind of thing.
Right. So as the vaccination kind of rolls out, we know that at 12 and above, that vaccination is going to be readily available probably within the next several weeks. We're hoping the same thing will happen with children younger than that. So somewhere down the road, that should help us get to somewhat of a normal place. Same thing with Matt, with the cafeteria monitors, having enough people to monitor what's going on in the cafeteria while we're socially distancing, while we're spacing, while kids have their masks on. We just need to ensure that we're providing a safe environment.
Okay, so I'm going to take a hypothetical, and a hypothetical of if things accelerate and these positions are not needed, what happens with those funds? What's your intent on those funds? Should they not be allocated for those intended purposes?
So then what we could do is go back into the grant and take a look at, how we might be able to utilize those a little bit better. Again, the way the grant has to be written, we've got to break it up into some different areas. We'd probably tap into and extend some of the remedial work that we'd want to do with kids in terms of supporting them. So that might be able to give us some more money to add some more, after school staff to support an after school program, those types of things. It could even go toward, some after school transportation to help kids get back and forth from school to home.
So I appreciate that viewpoint, because that's something that isn't clear on paper by just looking at it. And I would just say that that's something I would want administration to keep an eye on. If you know that those funds are going to be available and can be better applied for remedial services that we know our population needs, that we think about creative ways of leveraging those that are going to have the biggest impact.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more, Matt. Yep. And again, that's what we're looking to do. And we want to ensure that we're providing the best support we can for the kids with these one-time funds. And again, they're not going to be around forever. So we want to, help bridge those gaps that are there for those kids as well.
I appreciate it. And thank you to Member Mills for responding to that.
Thank you. So, quick question for me. This proposal includes a $200,000 increase in the use of E&D to offset the budget. And I guess I'm curious, we just made $1 million transfer to transportation stabilization. Part of the caveat with the $200,000 increase in E&D is an assurance that through surplus balance for this fiscal year, we'll be able to offset that in the future calculations of E&D. I guess I'm curious, why are we doing it that way as opposed to using our revolving accounts and reducing the budget in that way?
So, Mike, one of the reasons for the additional E&D, if you recall, is that we also brought forward into 21 approximately 1.4 million in transportation. Now, of that 1.4 million, we paid AA transportation for both home to school and for SPED, approximately 833,000. There currently is an encumbrance in transportation of 263,000 and change. With the payment to AA transportation, the available budget now with the carry forward is approximately $350,000. That figure, depending upon which way things go with Vanpool, is likely to increase to well over $400,000.
I'm sorry. So I guess my question is, I did specify transportation, but we have two other revolving accounts. I guess I'm curious why we aren't using any of our revolving accounts to bring that $200,000 forward, as opposed to doing it for E&D.
So I just one more point, Darryl, then you can jump in. The other two revolving accounts for the larger committee that Mike is referring to, I don't want to speak for Mike, but is A, school choice, and B, circuit breaker. And what we're trying to do in school choice is, for the first time, to create my term a rainy day fund. And by that I mean have the ability to go to a certain account, a fund, aside from E&D, for those unanticipated or for those surprises. Secondly, for the first time in, I think, in quite some time, the district brought forward into 21 from 20, approximately $1 million in circuit breaker. And again, that would be like our second, if you will, rainy day fund. And we are looking to bring forward into 22 value approximately 1.5 million from this year into next year. In the past couple of weeks, there have been some adjustments in our tuitions, and I think I mentioned very briefly to be at our last meeting, very briefly. But of those two, we're looking to hold on to them, especially with school choice, so that we have liquidity in the ability to address those unanticipated needs without having to tap into E&D. Darryl, did I miss anything?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. So, and again, I think two things when we're looking at those two funds, as Dan mentioned, having the opportunity to have some funds available, so that as Dan mentioned, we're not sure what will be coming down the road. We're not sure how things are going to play out. So this still gives us the capacity to access some funds. Excess and deficiency, our hands are tied quite a bit with excess and deficiency. We don't have access to it in the same way. We do have to go back to the towns for approval on any usage of E&D. It has to go to a town meeting, has to get voted on. So it is a little different. And this is something when Bob came in, when Dan came in, anyone that comes into our district, Christine came in, they're like, so what do you mean you don't have any backup funds to help support some of the things you might have to deal with during the school year, especially with such a large number of students and staff? And again, it's because we really do cut it very close. Bob, members, correct? We cut it very close every year. This is giving us a little bit of an opportunity to not cut it quite as close in that sense.
Thank you. With Ken and then Bob again.
Yeah, so I'm not so sure that those responses completely got at Chair Dennis's question, although I won't put words in his mouth. A couple of things I would add on to what Dan said, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Dan. The money for transportation that we're anticipating not giving to AA because of our settlement and whatever for Vanpool, since that was encumbered last year, we really have no choice but for that to fall to the bottom line for E&D. So that part of the money can't be put into a revolving account. It can only fall to E&D because it's an encumbrance from last year, is my impression.
Yes, that's correct. So right away, our bottom line has been padded by a minimum of $350,000, and that will increase. Yes, correct, Ken.
Ken, did you want to complete the thought, or were you done?
Yeah, I guess so. And the other thing is that I think this would still leave about $450,000 in E&D because we were about a 1.4 and change budget of E&D for certified E&D from last year. So the 350 plus that Dan speaks of before Vanpool plus the 450 that would be left is already about $800,000 towards our 1.1 or so policy minimum. So I just wanted to make the point about the why some of those funds couldn't go into revolving since they're last year money. Some of your point is still there, Mike. It doesn't answer all of it, but it's a part of it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, we talked about that when we talked about using E&D in the original budget at $750K, and part of it was just for that reason. So I'm asking about is the additional $200K, but I think I can move on from that. Bob?
So again, I'm not opposed to voting on this, but I think just in general, I'm wondering if Darryl and Dan would comment on what's an ideal amount of money? Well, what's an ideal percentage that's supposed to be in E&D for public school districts?
So I'll jump in, Darryl. Each year when our E&D is certified, on the bottom of the sheet, DOR, depending upon what the number is that year, they identify the value for the district. And not to exceed, with DOR, it's not to exceed 5% of the general fund appropriation, whatever that figure may be.
Okay. So what are we talking about on
We
for our district?
have a policy. I'm sorry, but I was going to try to just further answer your question. We have a policy within our committee that I believe we have a floor of 1% and a ceiling of 5%. Anything over 5% has to be returned, as Dan mentioned.
So through the chair, the figure for the FY20 certified E&D was $5.1 million based upon this year's operating budget.
So we're way below that.
Yeah, we are. And again, this goes back, and I'm not saying this is correct, but if you go back through budgets over the past 20 years here in the district, excess and deficiency, and Bob, you remember, we used to just blow through it every year. So we just take $1 million and put it right toward assessments, right toward the town assessments. So it did help lower the budget. As you know, over the past couple of years, we've been able to pull back on that, and we've been able to build it up a little bit more. And I think Ken mentioned this last night. There are things like the track up at the high school that we know we're going to need to do. We have tennis courts we know we're going to need to do. Those types of things are items that I think we're going to be looking at maybe out of E&D somewhere down the road. If we can't just roll it into a budget, but I'm comfortable with $1 million in there, Bob.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Eric.
Yeah, thanks. Just an extension of what Member Lavoie asked about the returning of funds should we not need them. When would we know that? So if we don't need the substitutes or the extra PPE, things like that, when would we know that those can be repositioned to other efforts?
Good question, Eric. I think it's really dependent upon how everything plays out with the vaccination, how it plays out with the requirements associated with CDC and DESE around social distancing, around PPE, those types of things. There are still a lot of things up in the air. When we do have meetings with the commissioner, the superintendent's group, we do hear him say, next year is probably not going to look like a normal year. There probably still will be PPE. There probably still will be some type of distancing requirements and so forth. So not that it will be clean, but if we'll see. It's all dependent upon when they start to reopen, and also when the vaccinations really become more student-centered, for those kids. Because again, until that time, masks are going to have to be worn. Kids, we're going to have PPE. We're going to have wipes. We're going to have hand sanitizer. All of those items are going to have to come into play.
And Darryl, if I could just add to that, Eric, the good thing about using one of these federal grants like the ESSER 3 grant, that goes over 2 fiscal years. So we have a kind of wide window to be able to amend that. So we can amend it at any point next year or the year after. So that's what's kind of important about using this as a funding source. It's not something that's going to be absolutely used by a very small time frame. We have a pretty wide window there to be able to react to what our needs are.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. That's a great point. And that's the other thing, having that flexibility. The first grants that came out, I believe the very first grant that we received had to be expended by December of last year. So I think the state and heard loud and clear from school districts that just didn't work. So they've been more generous with their timeframes.
And kind of a follow-up, I know you mentioned vaccines, I think 12 and up. We don't have specific guidance on any of that at this stage, correct?
Nothing, absolutely nothing.
In looking at the concerns sort of that maybe we discussed last night about planning and task force and the related, do we have sort of a commitment or understanding that we're going to talk through this throughout the summer, so we're not sort of caught flat-footed at all in the fall with guidance and decision making?
Yeah. So again, this summer versus last summer, it's night and day. It's not even close. We're now on the other end of the bell curve, in terms of coming back to somewhat of a normal situation. But yeah, this will be something as we kind of have our meetings. We will go through this with all of you, talk about where we're at. As we get information from the state, we'll go through that with you as well. But again, part of it will come down to what the expectations are around PPE, athletics, those types of things. I think it's going to look pretty normal, but not. It's not going to look like it did pre-March of last year.
And thank you. And kind of related to what Member Imber and Ottmeyer said about sort of concerns, and I've heard Bob mention multiple times about underfunding situations and lack of AP classes and things like that. I'm wondering if, and I know we said this year isn't the year to do it. I guess my question is, when is the right time to look at these concerns closer, so we don't end up sort of always saying the same thing? Now, I'm not saying we've done that over the years, but I've heard people on this committee who've been here for years say the same thing. So I'm wondering, when do we stop doing that, right?
Yep. So I think, here's one of the things I can say. I heard for many years, we need full day K, we need full day K, we need full day K. We put full day K in. We then put in tuition-free full day K. I heard people talk about technology, laptops, and so forth. Okay, you know what? We now have Chromebooks in all the high school students' hands and all the middle school students' hands, and we have a really robust program at the elementary level. So I wouldn't say that things have not happened. This is a bump in the road, and this is a bump that hit everybody. I think one of the things that we will be able to do is come back to this. I think, Eric, this might be a nice part of the strategic plan that we end up looking at and laying out, okay, over 5 years, what are the different items that we really want to focus on? If it's hitting up the high school with the Chapter 74 program, how are we going to fund that? You roll that into the budget. So we ended up, again, this past year, this was something that we were planning on putting in eventually. This past year kind of threw everything off. So not only our technology, but also our literacy program, those types of things. So all of that has to come back into play. So it will happen.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce. I mean, Bob's been on the committee for a long time, so I trust what he's saying. And I'm not a good person to deal with sort of repetitive problems. So if we can find a way to either communicate more about those more frequently and address the concerns specific to the budget in this case more regularly, or just even have more conversations about it, it might help us. Thanks.
Adam, a parliamentary inquiry.
Just something you had said at the beginning of this whole discussion. How many members are there on the committee at the moment?
At the moment, there are 21, but the full committee houses 22.
So, but if there's only 21 members, what is it, 2/3 of the full committee?
So my understanding is 2/3 of the full committee is 2/3 of the full committee as fully constituted, which is 2/3 of 22, which is 15.
Okay. All right, that covers it. Thanks.
Bet.
I'd like to propose a motion to vote on this monetary amount.
Bob, the motion's already on the floor. We're discussing the motion.
I'd like to call the question.
I second that.
Well, what I was going to do is ask if there are any other questions. I don't see any in the. I might be saving you a breath here. I don't see any that are raised. So if there are no other questions, Bob, if you don't mind, then we're going to go right to taking the vote. Randy, you want to call
Member Ayala?
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett?
Bennett, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Yes.
Member Haber?
Amber, yes.
Member Ember,
Member, yes.
Member Kirschenbaum,
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Knowlton,
Knowlton, yes.
Member Lavoy,
Lavoy, yes.
Member Longbeliel,
Longbeliel, yes.
Member Mills,
Mills, yes.
Member Mitchell,
Mitchell, yes.
Member Otmar,
Otmar, yes.
Member Pantos,
Pantos, yes.
Member Shapiro,
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva,
Silva, yes.
Member Smith,
Smith, yes.
Member Sullivan, Member Sullivan, Member Woodland,
Woodland, yes.
Member Young,
Young, yes.
Chair Dennis,
Dennis, yes. So I got 18 out of 18, Randy.
I got 19.
19.
19.
19 out of 19. We'll take it. All right. Motion passes. Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda is unfinished business from last night. My inclination going back to the agenda at this point is that we have the continued business under Facilities and Security Subcommittee. We have school council reports, and then we'll wrap it up if everyone's good with that plan. So we've completed motion 1 under Facilities and Security Subcommittee. I'll turn it to Adam to move on to the next.
Thanks, Mike. Just find my spot in my notes. Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to approve the first reading of amended policy 7110, policy relating to support operations, community use of school facilities, waiving the first reading.
Second.
And we'll take any discussion on the motion. Or actually, do you want to give an overview of it, Adam?
Yeah, if I could. So we had a very long discussion on this policy. This policy is basically intended to cover all aspects of community use of all school facilities, which is also why we're looking to delete several other policies when we get to them. Non-district use of facilities and facility usage for daycare programs. So this one policy basically will incorporate all of that together. As part of our very lengthy discussions, we discussed everything ranging from ranging from the policies that we wanted to delete, what they include, what they don't. We discussed laws governing cannabis use outside the home. We want to make sure the policy doesn't allow some sort of loophole while banning alcohol and tobacco. We did a very thorough job coming up with this policy. Made sure that it's fully updated to the latest legal requirements and references. I believe this one is a combination of the standard MASC policy and I believe a little bit of Lexington, along with a little bit of Wachusett thrown in there. So with that, I'll open it up to questions and comments.
Laura.
Thank you. I have a question about this policy in particular. I've heard a lot of members of the community in the last year speak about how they would like to be able to use the grounds of the high school, either for walking the track or for soccer events and things like that. And I've heard that they have been denied on a number of occasions. And I'm just wondering if this policy speaks to maybe the revision will facilitate a more, facilitate a more agreeable agreement among community members and allow access, or if this is a different policy that we would be speaking about.
So I'll take part of that, and then I'll leave the rest, I think, to Daryl. But you know, the point of this policy is basically stating that, you know, the committee seeks to allow individuals and organizations to use the buildings, you know, within the district. There is a bit of a different situation with the high school, where the district also owns the grounds, whereas at other schools the grounds are technically owned by the towns. So, but you know, just in general, you know, this lays out a general guideline on how, basically, it lays out a policy to allow administration to determine how to allow people to use the grounds. You know, it's not necessarily carte blanche to just walk in and use the grounds when you want. You know, there are, you know, it does walk the line too between policy and dictating procedure. You know, we set up the policy, and there are procedures in place to allow use of the facilities, and some uses require a rental fee, some uses don't, and those are laid out and those were voted on, I believe, last year or the year before. It's all blending together. But yeah, so this doesn't necessarily address those specific issues you're bringing up. Those are more on the procedure side of it. But
Yeah.
it does that we desire
Yeah,
to have it happen. Yep,
Sorry, Adam. Yeah, I agree. So the procedure side of it, you know, especially at the high school or the early childhood center, 2 buildings and 2 parcels of land that the district actually owns, those would be different, Laura. And when we're talking about this, I think much of what people seek is use of like the turf field or use of the baseball field. And again, the high school does allow those to be used at different times. The turf field, since we've replaced it, we do not rent it out, because that's one of the reasons why its lifespan was so fast, so quick, because it was rented out regularly, and it took its toll on the grass itself. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I have Carl next. Yep, Carl and Ken.
So kind of to a degree builds off of at least kind of what Laura had mentioned. So when I read this as community use, does that include like the use of town, like, so really more on the town, on everything but the high school and the EEC? Like, does that include use of like something by a town government or a town body, like a recreation committee? Because I know that there's separate stuff that's spelled out with that in the lease agreements. And so is this really more just like use of the community, not including like town governmental entities?
Adam, I could jump in there and maybe take this one.
Sure.
Carol, what these policies are really, what we're trying to structure this policy to do is to set some expectations and overall guidelines for whoever uses the facility. And that's what you guys are doing as a body. You're saying, we expect there will be, that the place will be clean. We'll expect that you know, blah, blah, blah. What's in that policy. We aligned it with current laws and regulations and also current misuses of property. Like as Adam mentioned, 20 years ago, the cannabis wasn't legalized, so recreational cannabis. So we tried to include some language in there to cover all of that stuff. You guys wouldn't be in there putting any policy that says this group can use it, this group cannot. That's what the school district does. And that's what Daryl was getting at when he said the difference between procedure and a policy. We would actually develop very specific things based on the facility or the structure. Maybe Mount View might have a different procedure as to what can be used and how it has to be picked up. versus another school like maybe NACOG would be very different from that, just based on what's available and how the expectations in the building. We would set up the procedures. You guys are looking to have a policy that's a big enough umbrella to encompass all things, but also is restrictive enough that it's very specific about some things. Like there will be no alcohol on the property, you know, there'll be no smoking on them. There's very specific expectations about some things like that. That's what you're looking to set up here, is something like that. And it's kind of a fine line between the two.
And I mean, to relate to that, I mean, it just wanted to make sure that we weren't like crossing some things in regards to the leases. So like, for example, like the language in the leases are basically like, if the towns want to use the school for, say, like the election, they can do that. And there's not really anything the district can do to stop them from doing that. And so where the language in there says that, like, in this case, I read it says the town must get permission from the superintendent to use their facilities. I mean, I guess it's technically true, but like the superintendent doesn't have a way to refuse them the right to do it. So it's like you have to ask, and then I have to give you permission. I have to grant it. So it's only like a type of scenario that I guess that plays out really when we're working with when the towns want to use the buildings that they own that we're leasing. And if the language, if this is something that like you guys talked about in the subcommittee and that it's broad enough that it kind of rules out some of those confrontations or conflicts with our lease agreements, then I think we're good.
So, I mean, there's nothing really in the policy that would restrict the towns from doing it. And you know, the lease agreements are a contract that we have with the towns, whereas this is just a school committee policy. You know, it has some weight, but it doesn't have the weight of a legally binding contract. You know, but I mean, besides saying that, you know, they can't saying the towns can't open a wine bar inside the schools, you know, there's nothing really that in here that will restrict them in any of their normal operations. Yeah, and again, that's like a wild out there example, but that's
cannabis sales.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't do wine bars around here; it's breweries. But
well, yeah,
you get the idea. I got it. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Ken.
My point was the same as Carl, so I won't repeat it. But the reason I was going to mention it, I want to mention, and when we were talking about the regional agreement, the town of Holden, or at least a representative from the town of Holden, came forward with concern about the pathway for them using Dawson for the summer program this summer, and are looking for language in the regional agreement around this kind of thing. So that was where I was going to then say what Carl said. So I figured the context was important, but I'll stop.
Any other questions or comments on the motion to amend policy 7110? Seeing none, Randy, can you call the roll?
Member Ayala?
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett?
Bennett, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Ember?
Ember, yes.
Member Kirschenbaum?
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Knowlton?
Knowlton, yes.
Member Lavoy?
Lavoy, yes.
Member Longbeliel?
Longbeliel, yes.
Member Mills?
Mills, yes.
Member Mitchell?
I believe
Member
you left.
Otmar? Yes, I see that. Thank you. Member Otmar?
Otmar, yes.
Member Pantos?
Pantos, yes.
Member Shapiro?
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva?
Silva, yes.
Member Smith?
Smith, yes.
Member Sullivan? Member Woodland?
Woodland, yes.
Member Young?
Young, yes.
And Chair Dennis.
Dennis, yes. Back to you, Adam.
All right. In the interest of time, I'm going to try to combine the next two motions, number 3 and number 4. So I'm going to make a motion to approve the first reading to delete policy 7112, policy relating to support operations, non-district use of facilities, and policy 7113, policy relating to support operations, facility usage for daycare programs. I don't know if I'm waiving the reading or not because there's nothing to read, but I'll waive the reading.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion?
So,
Or I'm sorry, go ahead and explain it, Adam.
yeah, so the 7112, the non-district use of facilities, that one was very completely covered by the amended 7110. So we just decided to get rid of it. And the facility usage for daycare programs, when we looked at that policy, it was a very old policy, and it was basically something that we just don't do anymore. It basically said the school district was interested in opening up and allowing daycare programs to open within the schools, which is not what we do. Yeah, it wasn't something that covered the the specific, I forget the name of it, but the vocational program that's at the high school, it didn't cover that. It was about other daycare programs that we don't offer at all. So we decided to just that whole policy.
Okay, we got Ken.
So in the second policy about the daycare, there is a line that I'm concerned deleting. It talks about, that the district is encouraging towns to run programs. The district shall also promote the use of district facilities for daycare use by all member towns, which they do, right? So we have before and after school programs. Further in that policy, it talks about the sponsoring town will hold us harmless from liability, et cetera, et cetera. So these programs are happening in our schools. We get rid of the policy that says they have to hold us not liable for whatever happens before or after. Is there maybe this isn't a question for you, it might be a question for administration. Is there language in whatever contracts we have with the towns when they run before and after school programs using some of our staff, hiring them separately, right? Like maybe people who do lunch for us and before and after school for them. So there is some blurriness, I think, in parents' minds, right, about who's running this. Is there a concern about getting rid of that liability language in the policy?
No, from my vantage point, we don't have a concern with that, Ken. Again, I hear what you're saying because many of the after-school programs, most of the staff are people who work in the buildings. We have one program that is run at Thomas Prince. That's not a program that's run by a rec department. And again, these are programs that have been running for as long as I've been around in all of these schools. So they're carryovers from an earlier time as well.
So, I mean, just to add a little bit, we did have discussions about the before and after school programs, and that deleting this wouldn't really impact the way that those operate, because those operate as just agreements with the district, and they're run again by the towns in town buildings. I do see your concern, and that wasn't something that had necessarily come up during discussions on the liability part, but we had discussed just about every other aspect of it, Ken.
I have Bob and then Linda Longbleal.
So this is kind of off the wall, but we have perhaps some political will to deal with the early education of kids and daycare, and I'm talking at the federal level. And I wonder if there's been consideration in terms of the deletion of this policy, in terms of, and of course we could come up with a new policy, but I wonder if as the country may pivot to taking care of little kids in different ways, whether the deletion of this policy would not be good. So, and I don't know anything about really, I'm just mulling here, I guess.
Bob, the recommendation that administration made on deleting this policy was the fact that we felt the new policy 7110 that would take the place of this and the other one was more all-encompassing. This was very specific, and in fact, there were aspects of this that we absolutely were not doing at this point. So from my perspective, if there's a policy in there that I know we're not following, then we got to either modify it or look at it or do something. I think we're in a better position by taking and adopting 7110, and many things can fit under that umbrella. It's much wider. This was very, very specific, and I'm not quite sure what was behind the writing of this 20-something years ago. So that's where we came from as an administrative team in recommending it.
Okay, thank you.
Linda Longbelial?
Is it urgent that we pass this policy tonight? Or can it wait till our next meeting? Because I think it might be useful to have legal answer Ken's question.
Are you asking about, which policy are you asking about? Are you asking about both or just 7113?
It's the one that Ken asked the liability question about.
So just 7113?
Yeah.
Okay. Daryl, Bob, Adam?
Yes. It's just the first reading tonight. You're not officially adopting any real policy.
Right.
You have to go through the second reading.
Okay, that's
So
true. That's true.
we could get back with some clarifications if that's what you're asking us to do.
Yes, that's what I'm asking for. Just some clarification on that one point.
Yeah.
So if we can get that clarification before we have the second reading, then I'm satisfied. Do I need to make a motion to that effect, or?
We can do that, Linda. You just said it, so we'll follow up. Bob's taking notes right now.
Okay. Does that mean Bob
no.
can't retire? No.
He can't retire until he gives the answer.
That's
so.
right.
Also to add to that, by adding, within 7110, it doesn't have the line that proper liability insurance will be required of all groups given permission to use school facilities. Again, that gets into the situation with the towns and lease agreements. But I would also see, again, to Ken's point, the towns and lease agreements would really override any policy we wrote on the daycare use as well about liability being required. So something like that, if we're going to push for that, should be in the lease agreement, I would believe. But
any other comment or
here.
Any other comment or discussion on this motion? Seeing none, we'll turn to Randy.
Member Ayala?
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett?
Bennett, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Ember?
Ember, yes.
Member Kirschenbaum?
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Knowlton?
Knowlton, yes.
Member Lavoy?
Lavoy, yes.
Member Longbelial?
Longbelial, yes.
Member Mills?
Mills, yes.
Member Otmar?
Otmar, yes.
Member Pantos?
Pantos, yes.
Member Shapiro?
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva?
Silva, yes.
Member Smith?
Smith, yes.
Member Sullivan? Member Woodland?
Woodland, yes.
Member Young?
Young, yes.
Chair Dennis?
Dennis, yes. All right, Adam, back to you.
All right. So moving to the next one, I'd like to make a motion to approve the first reading of new policy 7155, policy relating to support operations emergency plans, waiving the first reading.
Second.
Go ahead, Adam.
Okay. So this is a new policy. And actually just, as a point, it was specifically chosen to be number 7155 so that it precedes and sets the framework for our current policy 7156 on emergency response plans. So 7155 is the general policy for emergency plans. and 7156 covers more details and then provides policy for implementing 7155. And by bringing in 7155, we're also going to be looking to get rid of, actually it's going to be a little different than what's in the agenda. We're going to get rid of 7151 and 7158, but not 7152, because we couldn't come to a consensus on if everything on that was covered, and we chose to just push it forward to a meeting and discuss amending it or covering it in another policy. So again, just for the emergency plans, this lays out just that general plan that the district needs, and then 7156 is designed to mesh with that. So any questions?
Malaya.
I just had one, probably a technicality. Item number 7, I think it is, said if in the event the school possesses an automated external defibrillator. I thought all of our schools had them or were required to by law. So I was just curious about that wording, and whether our schools have them, because I thought all of our schools did, but I might be misremembering.
No, Malaya, you're correct. They all do.
Okay. So that was my only question about why that language was chosen instead of assuming that all of our schools have them because they are supposed to.
Malaya, the language came from the state. We took the language directly, as so did MASC. This is based off their model policy from the state law.
Okay, that's
regulation. Yeah.
That's helpful. If it's from the state, it's from the state. I just was clarifying that question. So thank you.
One thing we did add that wasn't within the state policy, the MASC policy, was item number 8, specifically because of the AEDs and things like that, making sure that those inspection maintenance plans, keeping the batteries charged, everything like that, that was part of this overall emergency plan. We felt that that was important.
Thank you. I have Linda Longbeliel next.
I had the same question as Member Gustafson, and my question's been answered. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll turn it to Randy.
Member Ayala?
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett?
Bennett, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Imber?
Imber, yes.
Member Kirschenbaum?
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Knowlton?
Knowlton, yes.
Member Lavoy?
Lavoy, yes.
Member Longbeliel?
Longbeliel, yes.
Member Mills?
Mills, yes.
Member Otmar?
Otmar, yes.
Member Pantos?
Pantos, yes.
Member Shapiro?
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva?
Silva, yes.
Member Smith?
Smith, yes.
Member Sullivan? Member Woodland?
Woodland, yes.
Member Young?
Young, yes.
And Chair Dennis.
Dennis, yes. Adam, back to you. Adam, I think you're on mute.
There we go. All right. I'm just going to go separately on these two. So I'll make a motion to approve the first reading to delete policy 7151, policy relating to support operations, school plans, waiving the reading.
Second.
And back to you.
All right. Yeah, this is just to delete it because we felt that 7155 and 7156 were definitely covered this one and then some. That was about it.
Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, we'll turn it to Randy.
Member Ayala?
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett?
Bennett, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Imber?
Imber, yes.
Member Kirschenbaum?
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Knowlton?
Knowlton, yes.
Member Lavoy?
Lavoy, yes.
Member Longbeliel?
Longbeliel, yes.
Member Mills?
Mills, yes.
Member Otmar?
Otmar, yes.
Member Pantos?
Pantos, yes.
Member Shapiro?
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva?
Silva, yes.
Member Smith?
Smith, yes.
Member Sullivan? Member Woodland?
Woodland, yes.
Member Young?
Young, yes.
Chair Dennis?
Dennis, yes.
All right. Can I move on?
On to you.
All right. So again, we're going to skip over item number 7. And, you know, the subcommittee basically intends to look at 7152 again and either amend 7156 to incorporate it or amend 7152 to just be more relevant and modern. So going with that, on to number 8. So motion to approve the first reading to delete policy 7158, policy relating to support operations, emergency evacuation, waiving the reading.
Second?
And again, this is the same as the previous one. It was just covered by 7155 and 7156.
Any questions or comments on deleting policy 7158? Seeing none, we'll turn it to Randy.
Member Ayala?
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett?
Bennett, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Imber?
Imber, yes.
Member Kirschenbaum?
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Knowlton?
Knowlton, yes.
Member Lavoy?
Lavoy, yes.
Member Longbeliel?
Longbeliel, yes.
Member Mills?
Mills, yes.
Member Otmar?
Otmar, yes.
Member Pantos?
Pantos, yes.
Member Shapiro?
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva?
Silva, yes.
Member Smith?
Smith, yes.
Member Sullivan? Member Woodland?
Woodland, yes.
Member Young?
Young, yes.
Chair Dennis?
Dennis, yes. So just want to thank the subcommittee and you, Adam, and everyone, and Linda and Mike. I know that there's a lot of work, a lot of policy work, a lot of discussion. I know that you folks have been burning the midnight oil, so thank you for bringing this forward.
Thanks.
The last item of unfinished business I have is school council reports. Are there any members who wish to give a school council report this evening? And Malaya in all caps. So it's
Yeah, that was an
enthusiastic.
accident. I'm sorry. My computer is doing weird things. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to yell. It's not technically a school council, but this is where it is for now. And hopefully that can be on our agenda for the summer to move to some other location. But I have a couple of logistical updates from CPAC, and hopefully they'll be able to come to our next meeting and give some more process-related questions that they have. But logistically, they asked me to pass along 2 things. The first, and I'm going to read from my phone. The first is that they have the annual Wind Beneath Their Wings recognition that they do, and they did it virtually last year. They're doing it virtually again this year. I'm not sure exactly how yet, but they are still doing it. It's an opportunity for families in the district to recognize people who have been made outstanding contributions to the individuals and their students with special needs in our district. They're currently accepting nominations. There's a limit of 2 nominations per child, and 4 per family. They have information on their Facebook page and their website, and I believe there'll be an email going out shortly. But they are accepting nominations until the 28th. I know hopefully next year we can be in person again. It's usually a very great recognition and ceremony, and means a lot to the people nominated. They get citations from the state, and there's usually some token involved, and it's a great way to recognize people who've made a difference, whether it's teachers or therapists or bus drivers, coaches, etc. There's a whole slew of, there's no limits on who can be nominated. So I encourage people to take a look at that and consider doing that. Also, they are doing a presentation on basic rights on May 11th. Well, they're not, but they're making it available. They're offering it. I'm not sure if it's at 6:30 or 7 o'clock, but it is May 11th, and that will also be posted on our website and the posting list as well. But it's done in conjunction with the Federation for Children with Special Needs, and they have an outside presenter come in. So it's usually a really informative night for parents and families, anyone involved with special education, to either get an introduction to the IEP process and your rights as a parent, or a refresher, or ask questions of an expert in that area. So they wanted me to announce those 2 things, and hopefully they'll be able to join us. I know they're in talks about that at our next meeting with some other thoughts on the year. So thank you.
Thank you. I have Ken next.
Yeah, so the high school met, I've lost all track of time, but I think since I last reported, we did an in-person Simco meeting, which was great. We got a tour of the school ahead of the reopening and saw all the spaces and all the distancing. We also talked a bit about graduation and pre-graduation events for our seniors, and I really want to give a shout, as it were, to Vicki DeSimone up at the high school for the tireless work she and the student officers and other volunteers in the community have been doing in a weird world, in a still limited world, around a lot of restrictions, a lot of places, to try and make the end of the year special for our kids. And it won't look like it normally looked, but it'll still hopefully be great. And thanks to Vicki and all of the folks who've been working with her to make that happen.
Thank you, Ken. And Bob?
I think Sherry's next.
Oh, sorry, Sherry.
That's okay. Thanks. An update from NAQUAG. They hosted the vaccine clinic, and they were very happy to have everybody in. They're working with Title I in person now. All the kids are super excited to be back, of course. I don't think I've given an update since then. And the staff is really doing an excellent job thinking out of the box, how they're doing snacks, recess, everything. They are a little hesitant but excited about the idea of pooled testing at that level. They have worked with Hanover Theater to get virtual shows for the kids. And in special ed, they're working on transition meetings, going from ECC to NAQUAG and then NAQUAG to Glenwood. And they're also working on evaluations for summer remediation.
Great. Thank you, Sherry. Bob?
All right, so I can get sanctioned here because it has nothing to do with the reports. But I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. I know we do this for all the money that we get serving as school committee members, but I feel incredibly honored. You folks are great, and I know that ultimately we're going to have to come to a decision again about the size of the school committee, but there are a lot of very bright. All of you guys are very bright and hardworking and caring, and I've been really fortunate to work with amazing folks. I mean, whether it was the Ed Sub or it's just the general committee, or all of you guys are hardworking and caring and bright and bring different expertise to the committee, and I all I can say is I've been honored. So thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone else with a school council report? Seeing none, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
Mike?
moved.
Mike?
Second.
Not tub time.
We'll turn to Randy.
Member Iowa?
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett?
Bennett, yes.
Member Gustafson?
I'm saying no because I had a question under new business, which we skipped, but I will say it's fine. It's fine. I'll answer it some other way. Thank you. So I'll say no.
You'll say no? Okay.
Yes.
Yes,
I'm
thank you.
saying no. It's fine. I'll live, but I'm saying no.
Member Haber?
So the Beatles song.
Haver, yes.
Member Imber?
Remember, yes.
Yay. Good luck. Member Kirschenbaum?
Yes.
Member Knowlton?
Knowlton, yes.
Member Lavoy?
Lavoy, yes.
Member Long-Balil?
Long-Balil, we'll miss you, Bob. Yes.
Member Mills?
Mills, yes.
Member Otmar?
Otmar, yes.
Member Pantos?
Pantos, yes.
Member Shapiro?
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva?
Silva, yes.
Member Smith?
Smith, yes.
Member Sullivan? Member Woodland?
Woodland, yes.
Member Young?
Young, yes.
And Chair Dennis.
Dennis, yes. Our meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the double duty in the last 2 days and on short notice. And like I said before, thank you again for our departing members. Best of luck to those of you who are up for re-election. And Bob, I'm sure you'll have a margarita for all of us. So you enjoyed working with you. So thanks, everyone. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.